What's up everybody, it's Dom from Lensprotogo and LensRentals, and welcome back to the channel. So as you can tell, I'm at home right now, and I just got back from a day of shooting with this kind of strange lens. It's a Canon 600mm f11 RF mount lens, and I'm really excited to talk about this thing today because although it's kind of a strange lens, I think we're going to find out that this is a pretty great lens for what it's worth. So I'm going to talk about the build of this lens for a bit and then briefly talk about these teleconverters, and then I'm going to look at the pictures I got today from this lens so we can really see what this thing is all about. Also, just for fun, I brought an 800mm f5.6L, which is a $13,000 super telephoto lens, to see just how much better a lens that advanced is compared to this super affordable 600mm RF. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is a 600mm f11 lens. It has autofocus and stabilization, weighs just over 2 pounds, and is only $700. It even has some cool Canon mirrorless features like this assignable control ring, and of course the Canon RF mount, which is basically how a lens like this can even be possible in the first place. So this is kind of an interesting choice by Canon to make a super affordable yet sort of bare bones super tele, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. They know that a lot of people just want to shoot super zoomed in, mostly in the daytime, not have to break out the tripod or monopod all the time, and obviously not spend thousands of dollars if they don't have to. So before I talk about the build of this lens, I feel like I should mention that our sister company LensRentals did a really cool blog post where they disassembled one of these lenses. It's super cool and it's definitely worth checking out. This lens, however, will remain completely intact today. Hopefully. So the build of this lens, as I mentioned before, it's a fixed f11 lens, which means it doesn't even go any higher than f11. Its aperture literally does not change, which means internally it has absolutely no moving diaphragm or aperture blades whatsoever. Another thing that stands out to me is that it uses this telescoping system to switch between shooting and storage modes, and the camera will only let the lens function if it's locked into this longer shooting position. And because of that, we got this large locking collar. Other than that, we have a nice large focusing ring and an assignable control ring that's all the rage with the kids these days. We also have this large grip area up here towards the top, which is kind of a different look for a Canon lens. It's got an 82mm filter thread and, as I mentioned before, features the Canon RF mount. It has in-lens stabilization and autofocus, although the autofocus area is kind of centralized and not very large. Optically, this lens includes some pretty cool new innovations from Canon, including the use of diffractive optics, which allows for a lens design with fewer elements, making this lens significantly more lightweight. So this lens is a fixed f11, and I know what you're thinking. If only that aperture were a little bit higher. Well, luckily for you, Canon also released these teleconverters, so if you combine this lens with the 1.4x teleconverter, that turns it into an 840mm f16 lens. And if you combine it with this 2x teleconverter, that turns it into a 1200mm f22 lens that is still light as a feather. So for most of the day, I was using this lens with the 1.4x teleconverter because I wanted to also be able to shoot on the 800mm and be able to compare the pictures afterwards. So the focal lengths aren't exact, but pretty close. Also, side note, I stopped down to f16 when I was shooting on the 800mm to match the aperture of the RF lens and the teleconverter. Also, the camera was in auto ISO and auto white balance while I was shooting on both lenses. So now I've got the photos on the computer, and it's time to see what a $12,000 price difference in two lenses really looks like. Okay, so there are probably a million places I could have went just to shoot geese in a pond, but I chose Totten Pond in Waltham because I saw a bald eagle here one time. So I came here with the shimmer of hope that I might actually see this bald eagle and have a lens that could actually capture it. So that would be super cool, but at the very least, I'm just gonna get these geese over here. Set the lens to shooting position. Yep, that means I gotta lock it. There we go. I also cannot believe how remarkably lightweight this is. I mean, you can see me, I'm literally shaking this thing around. It's unbelievable. And to think that your next option up for a 600mm lens from Canon is an absolutely enormous super tele that costs like $12,000. So ISO is capped out at the bottom and I'm at f16. So not bad. Get these goose butts. Thank God it's got stabilization, because at 600mm shooting without it is awfully hard. Focal length, oh my God, that's so funny. These geese are crazy. I can't believe I'm getting this focal length just by hand holding it like this. It's actually kind of amazing. It looks a little ridiculous. It looks like a literal telescope, but yeah, I can't believe it. Here's the thumbnail shot. So it turns out on the hand-holding test, the extremely light small lens is a lot more comfortable to handhold than this thing. Go figure. Okay, these guys actually just got really close to me, so I'm gonna try to get some 4K video of them on this thing before I leave. Okay, there's some sunlight. Anything good down there? Okay, so for the pluses of this lens image quality wise, the first thing that stood out to me is that the compression from this lens is reminiscent of a much more advanced super tele like a Canon L. Also, the focus fall off is not that harsh, and I kind of expected it to be, being a lens with not that many elements. I think that if the given light is right, you can get a really great picture from this lens, but I think it delivers a pretty pleasing image in general. And on a more critical note, image quality wise, it seems that a lot of people online were really impressed with this lens's sharpness. And don't get me wrong, I was too, but I really did think that this lens was just averagely sharp. Also, if the subject matter you're shooting already contains contrast, then that's going to help you a lot, because this lens didn't really do you a lot of favors in that department. It just doesn't pull out the contrast that a lens with more superior optics would. So I think the main difference between a lens like this and a high-end super tele is that a lens like this will give you a sharp image over the whole scale of the image, but the resolution power of, say, an 800mm will give you a tack sharp image even if you zoom way in. So some obvious benefits of this lens, I'm going to start with the price, because at $700, that's really hard to ignore. In the world of lenses, that is relatively extremely affordable, and if you compare it to what you would be paying of any other lens with a similar focal length, that's like nothing. Next, the absolute best thing about this lens physically is how light it is. With the 2x extender on, I thought it was kind of mind-blowing to be able to easily handhold the equivalent of a 1200mm lens, and I thought that that was really cool. Okay, the last positive thing is that although it's a cheap lens, it doesn't feel cheap. So I was a little weary when I saw that this lens had like a telescoping element to it, because that's usually an indicator of a not so well-made lens, but after using this all day, I gotta say that this feels really well secure. Okay, so now I'm gonna get into some of the more disappointing features about this lens, but honestly, this is a hard list for me to come up with, because this is a $700 lens, and anything I don't like about it, I'm willing to just chalk up to that. Luckily, manually focusing this lens isn't that bad, because the autofocus was not cooperating all the time, and you only have a pretty small area of autofocus to work with in the first place. Also, the autofocus didn't do a super good job when I was trying to track fast-moving subjects, even when there was a lot of contrast. So one obvious downfall of this lens is the fixed f11, which pretty much reserves the use of this lens to a sunny day, or really just any very well-lit environment. Alright, the last thing is, and I could be wrong about this, but I feel that these lenses may may degrade rather quickly. There's kind of a lot of plastic in the build, probably for weight reduction, and I happen to know that lenses that have a telescoping element to them are pretty prone to getting dust sucked up inside the lens. Because when you slide out the lens like this, you're basically just sucking air right into the barrel. But I feel like that's the only nitpicking I can do about this lens, because ultimately it's a $700 lens, and at that price, I'm not expecting perfection, and to be honest, I don't think Canon was either. And for what they set out to do, which is make an extremely approachable super tele lens, I think they did an excellent job. Also, side note for all the parents out there, this would be an absolutely perfect lens if you want to take excellent pictures of your kid doing a field sport, but you don't want to be that parent with the humongous lens at the soccer field. It's not that much of an investment, you can hand hold it really easily, and it stows away really easily too. So that's going to wrap up this video on my experience with this Canon 600mm f11 RF lens. And if you have any questions about this lens, or if you would like to see another video like this one, drop a comment in the comment section and we can start a discussion about what direction we think these mirrorless lenses are going in. Also, if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button below, and if you're not already, subscribe to the channel so you can stay tuned in for more of our weekly content. And we'll see you in the next one.